What kind of world sells a young woman like a prize, then tells her to smile while it happens? That was the question burning inside Marbel Crane as the dust of Silver Creek swirled around her boots the morning her life was taken from her. The town square was crowded, loud, full of men with whiskey on their breath, and women holding back tears. They called it the yearly bride lottery, a tradition wrapped in jokes and cheers. But Marbel felt the truth deep in her chest. It wasn't a celebration, it was a warning, reminding every woman here that her life wasn't her own. Marbel stood with her stepmother, Odessa Crane, a woman who wore perfume thick enough to choke the air and cruelty sharp enough to cut bone. Odessa dug her fingers into Marbel's arm and hissed through her painted smile. "Smile, girl. No man wants a sulking face." Marbel didn't smile, couldn't. She was 19, small and quiet, a girl who lived mostly in corners so people wouldn't notice her. But today, every eye felt like a knife. Her heart pounded in her ears as Judge Corbin Haskell stepped onto the platform, his gray mustache twitching like he enjoyed this far too much. He lifted a hat full of folded slips, names of the women being given away. "Gentlemen," he called out, voice booming across the square. "It's time to draw the brides." Cheering broke out. Someone laughed, someone else jeered. Marbel felt something cold settle into her bones. Odessa pushed her forward. "You owe me for raising you," Odessa snapped under her breath. "Don't forget that." Marbel kept her eyes on the ground. She had nothing left but a worn dress, a faded shawl, and a small wooden locket from her mother. Odessa had taken everything else, her money, her safety, her voice. Names were drawn, women cried, men bragged, and then Marbel Crane. The judge paused, letting the silence grow heavy before drawing a name from the hat. "And the winner is Ronan Thorne." A murmur rolled through the crowd. Marbel's breath caught. Ronan Thorne wasn't a man who came to town often. He lived far out in the dark stretch of land called Thorne Hollow. A tall, quiet rancher with storm-gray eyes and a past people whispered about. His wife had died 5 years ago. Since then, he barely spoke to anyone. Some said he lived with ghosts. Marbel felt her knees weaken as Ronan stepped forward. His hat shadowed his face, but when he looked at her, his eyes held no hunger, no gloating. Just a steady, unreadable calm. No one had ever looked at her like that. Odessa leaned close. "You could have done worse," she whispered. Marbel wanted to say, "I've just been sold," but her throat locked like it always did. Ronan nodded to the judge, then turned to her. "Miss Crane," he said softly. His voice was deep, rough, but not unkind. "You'd best gather your things. We have a long ride home." "Home!" She almost laughed at the word. She had never had one. Within the hour, she sat beside him on a wagon headed toward the open plains. She clutched her shawl tight as the land rolled past. Golden grass, sunburned ridges, distant mountains fading into blue. Most men would talk to fill the silence. Ronan didn't. "You're quiet," he said after a while. "I'm not used to talking much," she whispered. "That's fine," he replied. "Silence suits the road." His tone carried something tired, something patient. Not cold, just worn down by years of grief. She wondered if drawing her name had disappointed him. At midday, he stopped near a creek and handed her a tin of jerky and cornbread. "Eat," he said simply. Marbel stared at the food. In Odessa's house, she ate last, if at all. She didn't know how to accept kindness. "You'll faint if you don't," Ronan said, raising an eyebrow. She took a small bite, murmuring, "Thank you." He tore off a piece for himself and leaned against the wagon wheel. The only sound was the wind brushing through the grass. After a long moment, she spoke. "Do you always take part in the lottery?" He huffed softly. First time. "Why?" He filled the canteen, eyes fixed on the water. Figured someone needed saving. Didn't expect it to be you. Saving. The word hit her like a soft blow. "You didn't want a wife," she said. "I wanted a chance to give someone a better life," he answered simply. "That's all." She didn't know how to respond. No man had ever said anything like that to her. They continued on as the sky darkened. Storm clouds gathered thick and fast until Ronan pulled the reins tight. "Storm's coming," he said. We'll shelter up ahead." Rain broke open above them, heavy and cold. They pushed the horses harder until an old, abandoned chapel rose from the dark, leaning like a tired ghost. Inside, Ronan built a small fire. The warm light flickered over his face, softening the lines of loss etched into it. "You miss her," Marbel said before she could stop herself. He didn't look up. "Every day." The storm roared around them. Marbel wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, shivering. Ronan glanced over. "She was kind," he said quietly. "Kinder than I deserved." Marbel's voice trembled. "I'm sorry." "You don't need to be," he replied. Lightning flashed through the broken roof. Marbel flinched at the thunder, and before she realized it, Ronan reached out and steadied her hand. His touch was warm, gentle. She looked up at him, heart pounding. "I'm not used to anyone being gentle," she whispered. His eyes softened. "You will be." The words settled deep inside her, warm as the fire. By morning, the storm had passed. Ronan stepped outside first, checking the wagon. When Marbel followed, sunlight poured through the trees, turning the world golden. He looked back at her, ready to head home. Quote. She hesitated. The words still felt dangerous, but for the first time in her life, she wanted to believe it. "Yes," she whispered. "I'm ready." They set off down the muddy road toward Thorne Hollow, and for the first time since she was sold, Marbel Crane felt something unfamiliar. Hope. What if the first place that ever felt safe was also the place where danger would finally come looking for you? That question followed Marbel Crane through every morning she spent at Thorne Hollow, tucked between the rolling hills and the quiet whisper of pines. Life there was gentle in a way she had never known. Quiet mornings, warm bread, a dog named Boone who followed her everywhere, and Ronan Thorne, the man who'd taken her home not as a prize, but as a burden he carried carefully, like something fragile. The first morning she stepped outside, mist rolled across the field like a soft blanket. Ronan was already by the corral, sleeves rolled up, tending to the horses with slow, patient movements. He lifted his head as she approached, not startled, not irritated, just quietly aware of her. "There's coffee on the table," he said, "and bread in the tin." Marbel nodded. "Thank you." She still wasn't sure what she was allowed to do here, what words she was expected to say, what her place was. But when she stepped inside the small cabin he had given her, a space all her own for the first time in her life, something inside her loosened. Even the air felt kind. As days passed, she learned the rhythm of Thorne Hollow. Ronan didn't tell her what to do or where to be. He didn't give orders. He didn't take. He moved through the ranch like the land itself shaped him. Steady, patient, unhurried. Marbel found comfort in small tasks. Feeding the chickens, sweeping the porch, folding the laundry that smelled faintly of smoke and pine. These were simple things, but they made her feel like she existed beyond the lottery slip with her name on it. Boone, the shaggy black shepherd, became her shadow. When she laughed the first time he nudged her hand, Ronan paused in the yard. Something shifted in his eyes, something warm. One afternoon, a wagon rolled into the yard. Marbel froze when she saw it. Old fear, sharp and cold, raced through her body. She clutched the egg basket tight. But then a kind voice carried across the yard. "Ronan Thorne, you never come to town unless something is bleeding or dying." A woman stepped down, tall, confident, with warm brown eyes and a leather satchel. Ronan actually smiled. "Cora," he said, "you got here quick." Dr. Cora Leland looked around until her gaze landed on Marbel. "And this must be the young woman you wrote me about." Marbel nearly dropped the basket. "Wrote about me?" Ronan cleared his throat. "Thought she might need a checkup, somebody with gentle manners." Cora stepped closer, reading Marbel's face with the quiet skill of someone who had seen too much pain in women's eyes. "You've been through more than you should have," she said softly, "but you're safe here." Marbel's throat tightened. I think I am." Cora squeezed her hand. "Good. Then I'll come by often." From that day on, Cora returned weekly, sometimes for medical reasons, sometimes just to share tea and stories. She became the first woman Marbel trusted. Weeks turned into months. Spring arrived early. Thorne Hollow began to bloom again, and so did something inside Marbel. She walked farther each day, down by the creek, up the slope to the ridge, out to the edge of the fields where wildflowers grew in bright clusters. She left small gifts for Ronan, fresh bread, jars of jam, folded shirts. He always seemed to know they were from her. He always nodded when he passed her in the yard, quiet thanks in his eyes. Their silence slowly became something gentle, but the world had a way of testing any good thing. One evening, as Marbel hung wash on the line, she saw dust rising in the distance. Too much dust for one rider. Ronan stepped onto the porch, his eyes narrowing. "That's trouble." Marbel's heart dropped. "Who?" The riders came into focus. Judge Corbin Haskell leading the way, his black coat snapping in the wind like a crow's wing. 2 deputies rode behind him. And then, Odessa Crane. Marbel's breath caught. Ronan's jaw tightened. "Stay inside." She shook her head. "No, I won't hide anymore." He looked at her then, really looked, and something proud flickered in his eyes. Judge Haskell stopped at the gate, sliding off his horse with a practiced swagger. "Ronan Thorne," he said, "you've made quite a spectacle." Ronan crossed his arms. "State your business." Haskell pulled out a folded paper. "The bride lottery contract requires registration with the town within 30 days. You didn't register. That means the union is void. Miss Crane is still under the property terms of her sale." Quote. The word property slammed through the air like a whip. Ronan stepped forward, voice low and sharp. "She's not a thing." Haskell smirked. "She's valuable merchandise." Marbel felt something snap inside her, something that had lived in fear for too long. "No," she said, stepping forward. Her voice shook, but it didn't break. "I'm not." Odessa scoffed, parasol trembling. "You ungrateful girl, I raised you. You owe me." Marbel looked at her with steady eyes for the first time in her life. "You didn't raise me. You survived me." The crowd gathering behind the judge fell silent. Even Ronan looked at her with quiet awe. Haskell barked, "Sheriff! Take her!" But the sheriff didn't move. He looked at Marbel, then at the judge, and slowly removed his badge. "No more," he said. "This town's done with your games." Haskell's face turned red with rage. "This is mutiny." "No," Ronan said, stepping forward. "This is the truth." Then Marbel raised her voice, clear and strong. "You sold us like cattle. You told us our worth was measured in coin. But I found something you cannot take. I found my worth. And I won't go back to being something you can own." Silence, heavy, powerful. Then Dr. Cora stepped forward, holding a letter high. "I wrote the marshal. He's coming with warrants for the judge. This ends now." For the first time, Haskell looked afraid. He mounted his horse in fury. "You'll regret this!" Ronan didn't move. "Not as much as you will." Haskell turned and rode off, Odessa scrambling behind him. The yard fell quiet except for Boone's soft bark and the wind moving through the grass. Marbel's knees trembled. The strength she found only moments ago drained away as fast as it had come. Ronan reached her in 2 strides. His hands steadied her arms, his voice low. "You did it," he said. You stood up to him. Tears welled in her eyes, but her voice was steady. "We did." Ronan brushed a strand of hair from her cheek, his touch soft. "You're braver than you know." She held his gaze. "So are you." But trouble had only just begun. Haskell wasn't a man to accept defeat. Not from a quiet rancher, and not from the girl he once sold. The night would soon bring a danger neither of them were ready for, a danger that would test everything they had built. What happens when the man who once owned your fate decides he wants it back? That was the fear that settled over Thorne Hollow the night the danger finally came. The sky was dark, the moon thin as a silver thread. Marbel Crane sat by the fire in her small cabin, mending one of Ronan's shirts. The room was warm, safe, quiet. And then the horses screamed, not the sound of hunger or cold, the sound of fear. Marbel dropped the shirt and ran to the door. Before she reached it, Ronan's voice cut through the cabin. "Marbel," he said sharply, "put out the light." Her heart slammed in her chest. She hurried to snuff the lantern. Shadows swallowed the room. Ronan stood by the window, rifle in hand, his face tight with anger and dread. "Is it him?" she whispered. He nodded once. Haskell. The name felt like ice in her blood. Outside, hooves thundered across the yard. Torches flared in the darkness, making the ranch glow with a harsh orange light. There were 6, maybe 8 men. Enough to burn the world down if they wanted. A voice rose above the chaos. Cold, cruel, familiar. "Come out, Thorne!" Judge Haskell shouted. "Time to pay for making a fool of me." Ronan moved toward the door. "Don't," Marbel said, grabbing his arm. "They'll kill you." "I won't let them burn this place," he said softly, "or take you." She didn't let go. "Then I'm coming with you." He looked at her again, and for the first time in all the months she had known him, she saw fear in his eyes. Not fear for himself. Fear for her. But he nodded. "Stay behind me." He opened the door. A bullet ripped past his head, splintering the wood. The night exploded with gunfire. Men shouted. Horses reared. Torches flew across the yard like fire arrows. Ronan fired back, steady and quick. 2 men dove behind the trough. One cursed and ducked behind the barn. Then Marbel saw it, a torch arcing through the air toward the hayshed. "Ronan!" she cried. Flames burst upward, fast and hungry, lighting the whole yard. Heat rolled across her face as smoke poured into the sky. Ronan fired again, then stumbled back with a gasp. A bullet had torn through his side. He fell to one knee. Marbel screamed and dropped to him. "Ronan! Ronan!" "I'm fine," he gritted out. But he wasn't. Blood soaked her hands. She dragged him behind the porch rail, her breath coming fast. The gunfire grew louder. The fire grew hotter. The ranch that had saved her was burning down around them. Marbel grabbed the spare revolver Ronan kept by the door. Her hands shook, but her heart did not. A man crept toward them through the smoke. She aimed, fired. He fell. Ronan stared at her in shock. "Marbel!" "He was going to shoot you," she said, her voice shaking. "I won't let them take you from me." Shadows moved through the flames, more men coming. And then, Judge Corbin Haskell walked into the firelight, gun in hand, face twisted with rage. Odessa Crane rode behind him, pale and furious, her parasol useless, against the rain of sparks. Haskell lifted his pistol. "Bring me the girl!" Marbel stepped forward before Ronan could stop her. "I'm right here!" she shouted. The judge sneered. "You don't know who you're defying." "Yes," she said, raising the revolver. "I do." Before anyone could move, a voice rang out from the trees. "Judge Haskell! Drop the gun!" Dr. Cora Leland stepped into the yard, lantern raised high. "I sent word to the marshal. He's coming with warrants." "You're finished, Haskell." The judge spun toward her, fury blazing. Marbel fired again. The gun flew from his hand. He screamed, clutching his wrist. His men froze. Odessa screamed as her horse reared, throwing her into a burning wagon. Her dress caught fire. Men rushed to help her, shouting in panic. That was the breaking point. Haskell's hired guns dropped their weapons and ran into the darkness. The fight was over. The ranch smoldered with flames. Smoke curled into the rising dawn. Marbel ran to Ronan again, falling to her knees beside him. "Stay with me," she begged. "Please." Dr. Cora rushed over, tearing strips of cloth to wrap his wound. "It missed the lung," Cora said. "He'll live." Ronan groaned softly and reached for Marbel's hand. "You didn't hide," he whispered. "I'm done hiding," she said, tears falling. "You told me I had worth. Tonight I believed it." He gave a weak smile. "You saved me." "No," she whispered. "We saved each other." When the marshal arrived later, Haskell was taken away in chains. Odessa was carried off the property, shaking and ruined. The town stood behind Marbel, shame on their faces for the years they said nothing. The sun rose over the wreckage of Thorne Hollow, turning the smoke gold. Ronan sat propped against the porch post, arm wrapped around Marbel's waist. The ranch was wounded. So were they. But both were still standing. "You brought life back to this place," Ronan said softly. Marbel rested her head against his shoulder. "No, we did." He took her hand, holding it tight. "Marbel," he whispered, voice thick with emotion, "I want you to stay, not because the lottery said so, not because I brought you here, but because I love you." Her breath caught. Warm tears filled her eyes. "I love you too," she whispered, "with all I have." A few weeks later, when the fires were long gone and the land began to heal, they married under the great oak behind the house. A simple ribbon around their hands. A promise spoken in quiet voices. No one owned her now. No one ever would again. She chose this life. She chose him. Years later, Marbel Crane would look out over Thorne Hollow, now green and full again, and whisper to Ronan with a smile, "You once won me in a lottery." He would pull her close and answer, "No, I didn't win you. I was blessed with you." And together they stayed strong, the woman once sold, and the cowboy who became her forever.